12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, written by a fellow called Jordan B. Peterson, clinical psychologist from the University of Toronto. He has specialised insights into personality, myth, Christianity, archetypes as displayed through narratives and stories. He's got no one specialised thing, this guy. The book initially grew from Peterson's hobby of answering questions posited on a question answer site called Quora. I hope I'm saying that right. The question was, what was the most valuable things that everybody should know? Initially he answered with 40 rules, and he's since condensed that down into a proper book comprised of 12 rules, strangely enough. There are three main themes. Life is suffering. If you withdraw, you'll become suicidal. And to have a true meaningful life, you kind of have to mediate between suffering, or the other theme I suppose that comes into it a little bit is chaos and order, and mediating between chaos and order, as exemplified by a lot of the world's different religions and ideologies across our history. So some of the rules' reasonings are quite astute and poignant, and others are kind of like not so much. Some of them really do kind of mine at a sense of whoa that really kind of transcends some of the feelings that you've had towards some of these topics before, but others are just kind of like, you should have stopped a few pages ago, mate. Like, nah, you're going the wrong direction. But in fairness, this is more the former than the latter. The book does do a really good job at coming off as very passionate, and you get a sense that Peterson has kind of meditated a lot on these issues. These aren't just things that he's kind of thought off the back of his hand. These are really quite deep core things central to his version of being. And you do get a sense that if these were kind of formulated into a new age 12 commandments, you'd be doing a lot better off petting cats and making sure that kids are playing on their skateboards correctly than, keeping the Sabbath day holy. I don't know. He does give a lot of Judeo-Christian ideas a new lease of life here, which is surprising for someone given the platform that he has today to kind of, you have to say revert back to these kinds of ideas, but maybe we can find some meaning in them, we'll see. In total, Peterson lays out his rules pretty well concerning the balance between chaos and order between both of them. So, I'll go into the cons a little bit.
And there are a few spoilers here, guys, yeah.
I did really want a more expansive theory away from Christianity. He did feel like he was plugging the gap with a lot of Christianity there, and I just didn't like it. Concerning even a more diplomatic approach, I just don't feel like that will connect a lot with a lot of the readers, especially living in the Western world, as they're quite likely to be reading it in. I don't think it will connect with a lot of them. I suppose you could even have a deeper dialogue on whether it was necessary to hinge a lot of the rules, reasoning or arguments on Christianity and Christian myth and what it means in Christianity, because at times it just felt completely disconnected to the rules as given. I think that kind of hinge does show to be even more of a weakness when you consider that his version of Christianity, Peterson is very shady about exactly what he means about this, and his clarity on what the metaphysics of religion are, the philosophies of Christianity should be, and that's just not what's very, very clear about this book. Is you don't know whether he's philosophizing about some of the finer points of Christianity, as you could call them, or whether he's just essentially getting at that there are higher metaphysical realities or truths expressed through Christian stories, and therefore Jesus. That is something he's been accused of a fair bit, is this kind of this Jesus smuggling stuff, which I completely agree with. It is a big thing in the book. I would have also liked to have seen some more clinical stories, some anecdotal ones, because at times when he does bring those up, those do a real service to the book positively in exemplifying some of the rules. And even on the other side of things, you could have been a lot more evidential or statistical about stuff, because the geezer's a psychologist. He should be talking a lot more from psychology or sociological aspects or scientific aspects, but a lot of it does feel like it's drawn towards narrative and certain elements of Christian ideology and how they formulated the
the basis for Western democracy and liberal values, and even that's contentious. Again, this diplomatic, he's not very good at finding out how he should be diplomatic and connected with his audience, but he gives it a fair whack, in fairness. He also won't garner a lot of sympathy from far left critics concerning the whole kind of gender roles thing, or the biological essentialism, or yeah, what exactly men and women do. I mean, he doesn't do a very good job at separating if this is something that he believes has happened historically as a result of prejudice, or if it's something that he believes men and women are suited to, especially when he alludes to the patriarchal elements and if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, even that, debating if patriarchal elements are a good thing or a bad thing, then they're not going to get you in anyone's good press books. I can even take some of the sex differences on merit, which means my girlfriend will kill me. But even if I take some of those on merits, it's just not sure if he's talking about, again, if any of this is even biological essentialism, the extent to which this is structural or societally put forward or placed in young hearts and minds, or if he's advocating a kind of functionalist position. If women are better caregivers, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt, let's say they are better caregivers, is he reinforcing that this is something that we should go back to gender stereotypes on? I don't know, it's not clear. I also think some of the basis for his reasoning is kind of esoteric in domain. So the university experience as presented, I just don't feel like it's as universal as he makes it sound. I understand this is new psychological, I don't know, it's interesting psychologically to think about some of the identitarian things that are happening in universities, but stretching it to fit the kind of rules that, to the extent that he does, I don't feel like is necessary. The writing style is often quite difficult to follow. I think everyone will kind of be on the same page there. This isn't the easiest book to understand, but the parts of it that you do understand do come off as pretty good, I have to say. Although parts of it are difficult, it's endearing in the sense that he's a very good storyteller, and that translates through to a book like this. From the presentations and the lectures he's done before, do a really good service to how good of a storyteller he is. There you go, Jordan. Do a fiction book next. It's also not a criticism, I'd say, with caution. Sorry, without caution. But I do question how easy it is for the average reader or the layman to understand some of the ideas that he puts forth, because it is a genuine issue, I think, with Jordan Peterson, that he just doesn't get to the point as clearly as he can. I understand that complex questions need complex answers. However, you could get there a lot easier if you really tried to connect with your audience and what it is you're trying to get across to them, not what's just in your head, and how best to describe what's in your head. Describe it to us in the most basic way that you possibly can. So to go back to this religious stuff a bit, he does feel like he does a bit of this Jesus smuggling and ties himself in theological knots. Especially with some of the Cain and Abel stuff, you just don't feel like it's necessary. The amount that Cain and Abel's in there, I mean, you feel like you're standing next to one of those pretentious art philosophy kind of people who's staring at a nice painting and saying like, oh, this means this and there's symbolism here and that means that, when you just at bottom want to say, yeah, look, it's a nice picture, move on, there might be some meaning, but stop it. This is like, it's like doing a Rorschach test on someone. I think as a result, it's kind of easy to get conjecture from fact from a lot of the things that he's saying, and it's a pro and a con, in fairness, because he's very passionate in the book and it's a self-help book, and I think that's something that passion within books like this is often going amiss. So it's a difficult one. Even someone that he's been a colleague to before, I think it was at the University of Toronto, did say that when he was questioned on a lot of some of his ideas or his core beliefs, he just does a kind of overload of information. It's all volume, 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 and it's not something that you can say necessarily wins you an argument or is more truthful just because you know several pages about myth and symbolism. Some of it may map onto reality in a very interesting and profound way. It doesn't do much in the way of, solidifying the reasons behind why I should follow this rule. To be a bit nitpicky as well, I feel like some of the rules, again, it's just the reasoning. It's the reasoning behind them. Do He does talk, I think, a little bit too much about his social and political concerns, which may accurately reflect parts of the book in a good way, but some of it you just feel like he's hemmed in there because it's almost therapeutic for him to get out. He does bring a life and passion to this that has certainly been lacking in a lot of other books and a lot of other these kinds of domains before. He also does a very good job at navigating from very serious, pertinent aspects of life and the rules and the reasoning to going into the more enjoyable later rules like petting cats, stuff to do with skateboards. I won't reveal too much, but it's interesting. He also does a very convincing job of displaying the dichotomy between chaos and order very well and their relationship, mediating between those, how the religions classically have usually observed this. It's very interesting to think about these things as psychological truths, as almost passed down through narrative history, religious history. Very, very interesting in that sense. Well done. To me, there is a kind of transparency with his reasoning as well, that you don't feel like he has any ulterior motives. He's displaying what he thinks and how he thinks, in how he's constrained by the evidence as he sees it and his own values, and that's fair enough. You know, he seems like a completely open and honest guy in the ideas that he's presenting. I like it. Especially as a self-help book, it's done very well at emphasising the merits of bettering the individual for the sake of the individual, and even by extension, the betterment of society. That is something I feel like is lacking a lot right now, and externalising one's individual failures over to things that are beyond your control, external locus of control versus internal locus of control. But at best, the book can kind of transcend that and make you feel like you are more in control and you can do things that do impact society in a larger way. One of the criticisms I can see from that is that it ignores some of the structural barriers in the way of some people over other people. However, as the domain of a self-help book, you should focus on the individual. It's not an economics book, it's not a political book in and of itself. It's kind of political where it becomes personal, but he also does a very good job about talking about radical restructuring of economic and political societies, often, as history shows us, doesn't lead to much positive, let's say. I mean, whether that's just us stumbling through history and we could do better now, we know where that could go, is also an interesting question that you could probably pose to him. And although it's not a bullseye defence to the problem, you could argue that in focusing on some individual virtues there, you could change the structure of society just by changing mind by mind by mind by mind. So there was a Facebook page I was listening to the other day called Alter Ego, about how some of these points are incredibly relevant and incredibly profound and interesting at the level of the individual, but you cannot change things that have things like mass migration or things like income inequality. You can't change those at the level of individual virtue. Some of it does require some kind of structural change. I mean, that's inevitable. I can't see any other way around that. I understand his hesitancies, but yeah. I mean, at bottom, it's still a self-help book, and the parameters that it talks about changing the individual, very interesting. It's a very worthwhile book, and I think most people should give it a read, or even try and give it a read. The feedback from the book itself has actually been largely positive, and some people have even gone so far as to say that it's changed their lives to the point of saving their lives. And considering the net outcome of what some of his worst critics have said, that he's lent credence to dangerous ideas or regressive ideas, that versus saving the lives of a few people, which seems to be a much more overwhelming response than the negative response. Yeah, the net outcome of this book seems to have been a very popular one. Now, upon criticism, you can see how some of the issues with the book are problematic, to use that word. But yeah, as a net outcome, it seems to have done pretty well. I don't think enough people engage with the ideas as they actually are, rather than just kind of smearing him for even mentioning some of the ideas, which is cemented in psychological literature, which is something to contend with. You can't really argue with some of the points that he brings up. Overall, I'd say I was disappointed with the book in the way that I've been listening to Jordan Peterson and some of the ideas that I've had about him and what he could be, in that he's lent so much on Christianity and some ideas that I think are maybe regressive in some senses. Does let me down a bit, but at least read the book to give yourself that kind of psychological battleground to work out the ideas for yourselves, rather than actually just being like, this guy's a dick. It's a lot more complex than that, and I think I've managed to navigate through this review without saying, yeah, he's a dick. I don't think he's a dick. I think he's complex and he's wrong in some parts, and I suppose that's a good overall overarching theme of the review of the book. Let me know what you think in any comments below. If you've got any thoughts, if you disagree, let me know. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. Yeah, go for it. I mean, he's apparently one of the most influential people in the Western world right now as an intellectual. So, yeah, you should at least try and read the first chapter. Yeah, go for it. Cheers.